All right, welcome back to Mirror Path Podcast, where we explore the reflection between who we are, what we build, why we build it, and who we're building it for. Today's guest is Will Carter, the owner of Unshakeable Entrepreneurs. That's correct, right? Yeah, I'm so. I told you I might botch this one right now. Um, yeah, it's the Skool community. So if you are unfamiliar with the Skool platform, that's skool.com. It is for educators, guides, coaches, anybody who has something to teach or anybody who wants to learn. So, as far as Will goes, he is a powerful example of what I call compressed evolution. While a lot of people spend years asking, "Am I ready?" Will decided readiness was a choice, not a credential. So I'm going to go ahead and bring Will up onto the screen. So, Mr. Will, thank you for joining us today. Do you have anything that
Hello,
you want to add
hello.
to that?
Well, thank you for having me here. And yeah, I like how you said that because, in my opinion, everything is a choice, everything is a decision. And we'll get into this as we talk about this. This kind of influences my philosophy on things because unshakable to me is deciding who you are and then remaining loyal to that regardless of circumstances. It's a lot harder to do than it sounds, but it all starts with that decision.
Okay, yeah, so it is simple, is what I always like to say, but it is
Mm.
not easy. It depends actually on who you are, what you've been through. It could happen in a second and it could happen in 2 decades. So that's my philosophy on that. And it kind of ties into everything that I've seen from what you do. The inner mastery to create external results. And the one that I like that you made as one of your signature sayings was as within, so without. That's
Yeah.
I love that.
I can't I can't really take any credit for that. That's the oldest human writings available to us. I think it's the Emerald Tablet. But it's so true, and that it really forms the philosophies of many of the greats throughout history, from the Stoics to the sort of New Age authors and the business titans. Everyone who has succeeded has at some point uncovered the fact that what is going on within them controls their external behavior. Earl Nightingale famously came out with a stranger secret, which was entirely this. And behavioral psychology now has caught up and shown us a very clean path from Maxwell Maltz in 1960 to where we are now, 65 years later, on how who you believe you are, the identity that forms your beliefs, interpretations, and your associations controls your thinking, your rationality and your logic, your emotional reactions to the world, your behavior, and ultimately your results. And it all forms this loop where who you are, as within, is the broadcast or the light that then reflects into your circumstances. And I like to come at this from a very practical perspective. There are many people out there that look at it through more of a mystical lens, and I like to bring it into practicality. If your behavior is not aligned with that you have decided you want, then there is some alignment work to do internally, because at some point the brain starts to display the behavior of whatever is subconsciously normalized, and that becomes the work.
Someone is at the front door.
No, I think someone's at the front door.
Seems that way.
But what about the inner door? Is anybody at the inner door?
Well,
Do you need to check that?
that is a nah, that's fine. There is a metaphor there for the guardian, right? The internal and the external has that internal doorman, which is the conscious mind. And this is where a lot of people actually get stuck with this work. And like you said, simple but not easy. And I always like to really define things. So it's like, well, what exactly is not easy? What is difficult about this? Nothing when you think about it. It's simply a decision. I am now this way. And what holds people back is all of the conscious rationality,
Hmm.
thinking about, well, I've always been this way, using their imagination to recall quote unquote memories to reinforce the undesired state. And so this is why, as I got into this work, became certified, and I work now as a hypnotherapist. That's my primary service, because putting that conscious mind to sleep, as it's said, is kind of the key to getting to those deeper aspects of who we truly are. And the results that we're getting, and I'm sure you've heard this, many people have said it right the way back to James Allen, is that we don't get what we want, right? We get who we are. And the human is conscious mind, which is available to select, right? To decide, to desire. All of that is conscious. So I like to say that the conscious mind is the selector, but the subconscious mind is the projector. And in order to get to that subconscious mind, there needs to be an alignment between the two. So once you have selected something, it can't be looked at a distance anymore, because that's all that will be projected is the I don't have it and I'm looking at it. We must shift the lens, as it said in scripture, to I am it right now. And then the subconscious mind, which is impersonal, it has no ability to accept or reject this stuff. It will simply display via behavior, interpretation, and perception whatever is true within itself. So that's where we need to go to actually make the change. And it's so simple, right? But again, most people experience it as difficult because they're always grinding and hustling against themselves.
Yeah, and that has a lot to do with societal noise. But I do want to touch on something that you said there, and that is you want to ground it from spirituality. Like, it's not different, it's just worded differently. And the whole, I love what you're doing with it, because I actually had that same thought with changing it from a mystical woo woo kind of world view, because meditation was kind of seen that way, at least where I'm from.
Mm.
And then, what is that? I wanted to change it from meditation to introspection to make it more practical. Like, my self mastery book is basically practical self mastery, or pseudo enlightenment, if you want to call it that. It's just a formula that we all really run on. And one of the things that really interested me about what you have going on was my Pomepal cycle, my 5-step cycle. I saw your own framework on that, and it was exactly the same as what I did. And that made me think, like, it was basically a confirmation, because I've seen that so many times from so many different areas. I think OODA is also similar, but they have one less step, and yours was like right on point with mine. That's why it was like an instant connection between us.
I
So
think that there's so many individual perspectives, right? There are as many
mhm.
ways to do something as there are people to do it. And I think, though, at some point, though, everything converges. And one of my mentors, Bob Proctor, used to say, like, if you go right the way back through history, people have disagreed on just about everything, but they've all agreed on that you become what you think about in their own version, right? People have said it religiously, people have said it practically. We have both today. You know, we're in a very fortunate position where we have observable, measurable behavioral psychology, we have neuroscience, we have all the great things that the logical mind can now look at and say, yes, this is objectively true. I say that with a bit of a tongue in cheek because nothing is objectively true. But we have that understanding, and now it just becomes a case of, okay, well, now that we have all the tools and the frameworks and things like that, what's missing? Why isn't everyone living their dream life? Why isn't everyone living fully fulfilled and actualized? And the modern problem is weakened attention. They're not attentive, they're not disciplined in their thinking and in their internal being, and that ultimately is the decider in whether they will change who they are being or not. And the way I see this said so many times is, like, most people visit where they like to be, but then they go back to who they really believe they are, never fully moving into that new version of themselves. And because of that, they never get the results. So they live in perpetual frustration of, I know what to do, but I'm not doing it. And that right there became the problem that I was interested in solving.
Yeah, and that's why you went into hypnotherapy, correct? Because that's needed for a lot of people out there.
I,
That
I would say it's
guidance,
definitely,
that step.
yeah, it's definitely helpful. I would say nothing is needed other than a decision and the
Yeah.
awareness and the ability to remain in that decision, right? That is all that is needed. In basically all personal development, all personal change could be boiled down to be it.
Yeah.
Like that's it. However, like I say, many people struggle because it's like, what about the thoughts? What about the emotions? What about the feelings?
What about other
But when
people? What about
you,
the community?
so,
What about their
exactly
thoughts?
right, there are so many things that we could talk about there because but it all comes down to attention, which is focused awareness. And I like to say that if you can master awareness, then you master everything because the first step in transformation is awareness, right? Becoming aware. And what really helped me understand this was that awareness is what I am. I'm in a body, I have a mind, but I'm not my body and I'm not my mind because I could lose parts of my body. You know, my arm could be my arm, my leg, whatever. It's not me, it's my vehicle. And similarly, the mind is a collection of experiences, it's a collection of decisions, neural synaptic connections. It's basically my computer where I keep my information and I process new data. That's what that is. I can be removed from that, right? In a hypnagogic state, in a hypnopompic state, my conscious mind can be removed from that, and I can be above mind. So those two things are not what I am, right? And I am the awareness that is always aware. And this is really, really subtle to understand, right? Because most people believe that they are the body and that they have a mind, right? I'm a physical being and I have a mind that thinks sometimes. And that's how most people visit their experience of life. So they'll go through their days and they'll look at what's objectively true to them and say, this is my reality. Now, we can disprove that very casually, right? Because what one person sees from their perspective is not the objective reality of the other people who see it from a different perspective. So becomes really, really interesting. And when you focus on the awareness and the attention, these are the two things that I think are needed to be marshaled in order to change any element of yourself. Because a lot of people go into this trying to change the physical results, right? Which is what they think they want. And the physical result is a reflection or an expression of who they are being internally. And I mean this very, very practically. So I like to give the example of the gym. So somebody wants to change their body, right? They can't interact directly with the body, right? They must go to through the process of doing the exercises and eating nutrition. So that's the cause. And then the expression is the body, right? They can't sculpt the body directly. They have to do the things, the cause that cause the effect. And this is why I think a lot of people get lost in this work, is they're always trying to change the effect without going to the cause. And the cause is who you're being, what you're feeding your garden of attention with, and then the fruit of that is basically out of your control, largely, because 90 to 95% of behavior is subconscious. And this is why people struggle, as they want and they desperately try and strive and push and force with the 10%, with their awareness, the conscious mind awareness, not realizing that they're working against themselves. And this is really where the frustration of this comes from. It's like, I know what I want. Why am I not doing the things I know how to do? That's because your subconscious wants something else. It wants whatever's been subconsciously normalized. And that's the fact. The matter of the fact is, whatever is subconsciously normalized in terms of your body, your health, your wealth level, your social status, whatever's normalized is expressed. And that's why it's so interesting when you can help somebody change whatever they normalize internally, because that then will change how their behavior displays, what they show up and do in the world. And ultimately, the reflection of that, or the effect of that, is the results they get. And that's why it's so interesting and so important to start internally, what I call the internal game, because the external game is the expression, right? It's like when you play a game, you're not creating the result, you're playing the game that then creates the result if you play it correctly.
Yeah. And what you said there, a lot of that, the reason why I said earlier about people talking to you and going through their mind's fog because they need that guidance, right? So
Mm.
the reason why I said people need that guidance is because we're trained that way. Just because societal noise gets in our minds, and they tries to teach you to be a cog in the machine. What you're essentially doing is what I like to say, teaching people how to be a machine within that machine. So your whole, I remember you talking about sovereignty, the
Mm,
identity, finding
yeah.
yourself. And that was another thing that I really wanted to kind of touch on with you. How did you get to understanding that sovereignty was what you wanted to, or how did you reach that moment of sovereignty?
Well, it's the beautiful thing about this is oftentimes it takes what's known as a dark night of the soul to awaken from the subconscious routines that you're playing. And for me, I had a couple of these through my life. So when I was 25, I had a bit of a crisis of meaning. Growing up, my intention was always to go to the military, like my dad, and that was always my mission from when I was very, very small. So I would train. I was very fit as a kid. And then when I was 15, I broke my foot skateboarding and I had to have a metal ankle, so surgery, which meant that I could not, because I'd failed the physical test, go to the military anymore. And so I got into sales, and very fortunate to have fallen in with a good crowd who taught me a lot of the things that I now know, but I couldn't appreciate at the time. But I got turned on to personal development, things like Jim Rohn, Brian Tracy, all the great books like Who Dares Sells, things like that. So I went along with that for a while, and I was able to get quite successful in sales at quite an early age. But then around 2025, I was like, well, what am I doing with my life? What's the purpose of all this? And it really took me a while and some actual hypnotherapy, which is my first exposure with that, to really find what I wanted. And so in the sort of decade that passed after that, it was a lot of exploration. It was a lot of learning and application, which led me to this perspective that I have now. And so sovereignty was the realization that no matter what's going on outside of me, nothing and no one can control my awareness if I am paying attention. And Viktor Frankl said this amazingly well in his book, Man's Search for Meaning. And I always like to say this to people, he had the very worst conditions that I could imagine, right? He was in a concentration camp in Nazi Germany. He had all of his friends and family killed around him, had to bury them. He had to do menial, hard labor almost all day, every day. And he came to the realization that no matter what's going on around me, I have full control over what's going on within me. And that is sovereignty at the truest level. And so at that point, I realized that no matter what the circumstances are outside of me, I can choose to be who I want to be internally. And if I can hold my attention on that, as my favorite author, Neville Goddard, would say, the great secret to success is to focus the attention on the feeling of the wish fulfilled without permitting any distraction. And it's that last part that I think people struggle with, without permitting any distraction. So it's like, okay, well, if I know that I need to subconsciously normalize the next level of success for me, whatever that looks like, right? Body, relationship, money, whatever it is, then I must train myself to be that, because the great thing about the brain and the mind is that it only has two modes, I am or I am not. And really it only understands I am. And so whatever is implied via your normalizations is what is expressed through your behavior. And this is where the real freedom and sovereignty comes in. And I think that once somebody gets a peek behind the curtain at how this actually works, and they can say to themselves, well, I don't directly control my behavior, because most of the time my brain is not in the present moment. I'm in imagination, right? Whether it's the past or the future or imaginal arguments or whatever it is. The science shows that about 90% of our time is spent in here, not present in the moment. And the body and brain don't stop working when that happens. We've all had that experience while we're driving and we've suddenly snapped back to it. Didn't crash the car because the subconscious mind is running the show. So if we understand that whatever is subconsciously normalized is expressed through behavior, and that behavior is running the show 99% of the time for most people, right? The priority becomes changing who you are internally. That becomes the priority, right? Who do you say I am? And it's the disciplined awareness of occupying the new state without permitting distraction, without counter intentions, as it's called, that actually leads to normalizing the new and the desired. Because once you normalize something, your behavior will adjust to create it. Whatever you've got to do, however you've got to interpret it, and this isn't to say it's without work or effort, but it's like if you know, for example, that your baseline is 100,000 a year, and suddenly circumstances are around you and you only get 50, you're going to feel, you're going to feel the burn. And subconsciously, what you're going to do is you're going to put your foot on the gas to earn more to get back up to where you are comfortable, right? This is what was called the snapback effect by Maxwell Maltz. And it works the other way as well. If you're used to 100,000 a year and you suddenly earn 250, you're going to snap back. You're going to take your foot off the gas to bring yourself back down to whatever you believe is normal. And the really interesting thing is that your conscious mind will justify it. And I'm sure you've heard this, right? How we make emotional decisions and then justify with logic. This is how it works. Because your egoic mind isn't designed to achieve your desires. It's designed to keep you safe, to keep you stable, and to justify why you are where you are, so that you stay there, because it's predictable. And so once we know this, the thing that becomes the most important work of all is to deliberately decide who you want to be and then occupy that without permitting any distraction. Because the expression of that becomes the behavior, right? And then the behavior leads to the result. So if somebody wants more money, they have to normalize the version of themselves that has more money. I know it sounds obvious when we say it this way, but people are like, well, what funnel do I need? Or what's the best business opportunity? Not realizing that if they don't change who they are, they can have the very best business opportunity in the world and not be able to act on it, right? They'll procrastinate, they'll hesitate, they'll keep it at a distance. I like to say it's like having a Formula One car, but putting a baby in it. It's the best car in the world, fastest car in the world, but it can't go anywhere because the driver isn't suitable for it. And I think that this is really the work that is underneath a lot of the noise you were mentioning earlier on. Because once you realize that this is 100% in your control, that's sovereignty. Because no one can take it away from you as long as you're aware, as long as you're disciplined in your awareness and your attention.
Wow. Yeah, I completely agree with everything you just said. There's also you brought up Viktor Frankl and the stimulus to response.
Mm-hmm.
That's what popped in my head with what you were
Yeah.
saying. And
Metacognition
the
is so
first three
interesting.
steps.
Go ahead.
We'll go into that in just a moment if you'd like. But the 3 steps. So the first 3 steps in both of our stages is awareness, understanding, and then creating the axiom. So that's creating the truth based on your understanding. So that's what just popped in my head with what you were saying on there, because those are the 3 necessary steps. You cannot go from 1 to 5 without going 2, 3, and 4. So that you cannot get that sovereign state without doing those. Now,
Yeah.
I would like to hear about this metacognition.
Well, I'll briefly touch on it. But yeah, Viktor Frankl, again, famous for many reasons, but one of them was the stimulus response. So he would say that between stimulus and response, there is a gap, and in that gap lies your freedom to choose. This has been further expanded into metacognition, which is above cognition, becoming aware of your thinking. And the beautiful thing about practicing this is you become aware of the thought and then the response to the thought. So let's say, for example, somebody cuts you off in traffic, right? The classic example. Somebody who's unaware simply fulfills an emotional program response, right? They'll shout, they'll get angry, they'll try and justify their position through their behavior. Cool. Okay, that person did you wrong, and now you are justified in a response. But that response is very likely unhelpful. And that person then will keep replaying that scene and take it through their day, and they will filter the experiences of that day through their elevated, agitated, and oftentimes very destructive viewpoint, right? So they basically will take that problem that happened in a split second and it'll carry it through the day, experiencing their day that way. What metacognition allows you to do... Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying, and it'll affect every decision you make during that day.
Absolutely. because again, the beautiful thing to understand is we don't see reality as it is. Nobody sees reality as it is. There is no objective reality, as Stephen Hawking would say. We have a subjective reality or a subjective experience of reality. And I like to say that everyone is objectively correct within their subjective experience of reality, right? Because to them, it's true. But again, it's like if two people look at a penny on the ground, one person might see a lot of money, one person might see nothing, not worth the bother to go pick it up. It's not true or false objectively, it's subjectively true or false to that person. And so we look at life through the lens of our own subjective reality. So once we understand that, what metacognition allows you to do is to realize, okay, this is a stimulus that happened, right? Somebody cut me off in traffic. That's the fact. That's my objective truth. My brain is trying to predict what's going to happen, and so it's elevating me into a state where I am hypervigilant, where I am emotionally invested in the moment, so I'm present. And so now, rather than allowing that to pull into a defensive reaction, which is going to be to shout and to make yourself appear big so that you seem safe, which is what's going on, I'm going to choose to let that go. I'm going to acknowledge the response. I'm going to acknowledge the sympathetic nervous system expression, and I'm deliberately going to choose to take a few breaths and calm down and to teach my body that, no, actually, I'm safe in the moment. Nothing's happening. Nothing's going to happen. I am safe. And what metacognition is basically the ability to go above thought and to see that happening and then to say, no, I'm going to redirect myself this way. This is basically emotional mastery, emotional regulation. But it all starts with the thinking, right? And the thing that really blew me away when I learned it is that you don't generate your thoughts. Your thoughts are automatically generated by your brain in response to stimuli. So like you've probably had this happen, right? Where something happens and there's immediately a thought that comes into mind. Now, that's not you. That is your mind effectively generating a thought based on association and stimulation. And what metacognition is the ability to really become aware of that. And to say, okay, my mind is going in this direction. I'm thinking these thoughts. Is that what I want? No? Okay. What do I want? I want to be calm, relaxed, and in control of myself. Then I'm going to go ahead and position myself in a calm, relaxed state. I'm going to start thinking I'm always the best in these situations. You know, I'm able to master myself in every single situation in the world. This is proof positive that I'm getting better at mastering myself. Now that person goes through their day with evidence that they are who they say they are. So they don't feel agitated and view life through that lens. They now feel more empowered because of something that is seemingly negative. And it's that ability to, in the moment, redirect the attention that allows them to stay centered in the chosen identity. And this is really the heart of why I do what I do. Because what Unshakeable means is things are going to happen out there. The world is the world, right? Situation, stimulation, everything's going to be out there. We can't stop that. But your ability to determine who you are as you interact with it is your power. That's in your control. And what Unshakeable means is remaining in your chosen situation, regardless of situations. This is what Viktor Frankl was talking about. And what I have found is the single highest leverage point for the average individual who is almost entirely reactive to the world. And this is the really amazing power that we have if we will practice it. And today, in 2026, with basically infinite distraction, infinite renting out of our attention, right, to algorithms, to feeds, it becomes a very dangerous landscape to be in if you're unconscious, because you are literally being bombarded now more than ever in history with all of these things competing for the one golden currency you have, which is your attention. And so the person that can master their attention and bring it into their chosen identity and state is the person that can control their behavior. And in a very practical way, the person that can deliberately control their behavior can deliberately control their outcomes. And so this is why I keep going back to that quote by Neville, right? The great secret to success is to focus the attention on what he described as the feeling of the wish fulfilled, but what we could also say is the state that would be subconsciously normalizing the outcome that you want without permitting the distraction. And again, this is what Unshakeable means to me. So this is why that's becomes kind of like the brand or the chant that I have that I try and champion the cause for. because that's, I believe, the highest leverage point for the average individual if they want to get closer to the kind of person they actually want to be.
Yeah, so the way you were saying that, what popped into my mind was looking at the result, right? So everything has a formula, and if you can see the result and you can see the formula and you understand each part of that, take out the doom scrolling, take out social media, take
Yeah.
out this and that shortens it to the result. But so many people will not take those out. Like whatever it may be, even people get to the result faster because they take out family time, put in work time, and then they get it to it a lot faster, but they sacrifice what
Mm-hmm.
they're fighting for, and that is that is a choice that people need to understand that they need to make. Like,
Yeah.
yes, you're getting to that result faster, but what's more devastating than coming home to a family that you're working all this time for to secure the future, and then they learn to live without you?
Yeah, 100%. And
That
there was a guy. I'm not sure if you heard of this guy. I think his name was Mark Pearson, the guy that made Minecraft, right? And he sold Minecraft for, I think it was, yeah, Marcus Persson. He sold Minecraft, I think, for about 15 billion or whatever sorry, 2.5 billion to Microsoft. And he fell into a deep depression afterwards because he'd lost the
I
thing
could
that gave him life, which was building this thing that he loved. And he said he had all the money. He was able to like outbid, I think it was Beyonce or something, on a house in Beverly Hills or whatever. So he had all the material like stuff, but like that is not the source of fulfillment. That is an expression, right? And like many people fall into the fallacy of I will be different when the situation or the external arrangement of things changes, and then I will unlock a state fulfillment that is within me now, not realizing that it's the occupation of the state that leads the behavior to the expression of that thing. And so it's interesting how you said that, right? Because this ultimately comes down to one of the most important things that an individual can do, which is to know their values, right? Values elicitation, as it's known in NLP. Because when you can start to really arrange your life by what you value, so for me, for example, my highest value is peace. I won't do anything to get rid of my peace because without that, I'm always trying to get to peace. So that's my end goal. And right underneath peace is freedom and authenticity. Those are my top three. And so I can almost like a razor look at opportunities and say, okay, this is going to give me financial return, but it's going to take away my peace. So I'll decline it. Because much like you said, it's like doing the thing for the family, but giving up the family to get the thing. It doesn't really make any sense because the value is the family and then the thing. It becomes very easy to know what to focus on when you know what your values are. So I highly recommend that everybody do a 15-minute values elicitation process. And it's so simple. There's plenty of guided examples on YouTube. And it will change the way you live your life. Because there are people out there who value success more than peace. There are people out there that value success more than family, and that's fine. If it's a deliberate decision, then they will experience fulfillment because effectively self-esteem and fulfillment are when your behavior and your values are aligned.
My mind just goes into weird tangents of different topics to talk about with this, like especially when I'm talking to you and how we align so much on all the self mastery aspects of it. Like it just gets. Maybe I do need to learn more about that NLP that you were talking about, neuro
It's
linguistic programming.
it's very interesting. It's basic. There's nothing strange about it. It's basically a modality of interacting with your mind. So it's talking to the brain in its own language, right? The neuro brain, linguistic programming, the way that your brain is programmed linguistically. And it was made by John Grinder and Richard Bandler. Tony Robbins is another person who basically does the same thing. I found out the other day that they actually had a falling out back in the 80s where Bandler sued Tony Robbins for basically teaching NLP. But that's what it is. It's just how to talk to your brain in a language it actually understands. And so it becomes a tool in the toolbox, but it's just a tool. And this is why I said earlier on, the only things that are necessary are a decision and then loyalty to that decision. Like, those are the only two things. And there are so many tools that we can use, right? Hypnotherapy, rapid transformational therapy. There's so many tools that you can use, but that's all they are, is tools and techniques. They're scaffolds. Ultimately, what it's deciding is, who are you being, and will you remain there? And my favorite book on this is actually the Bible of all books. And I don't look at it from the religious lens, because I'm not a religious person, but I'm a deeply spiritual person these days. And the Bible is one of the best books to teach you how to use your mind. So it would say in the Bible, for example, seek ye first the kingdom of heaven and its righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. That can be directly translated into behavioral psychology to mean, seek first the state that would be yours should you have the thing that you want, and remain there, righteousness, and these things will be added unto you. The behavior will then demonstrate itself through, the state will demonstrate itself through behavior. So when we look at these ancient texts, right, and all of them have this message throughout them, for people who would pass on information through parable and story, the way that it was done generations and millennia ago, it becomes incredibly insightful, because they were all saying the same thing. Whatever is true within will be made true without. Who you are is what you will display. And the beautiful thing about this is that the results don't lie. So if you ever need to say, well, who am I? You just look at your results, and they show you this is who you have been. And the beauty is that you're not trapped there. With awareness, you can say, okay, well, is that who I want to be going forward? If the answer is no, know that you can change it. And the only quote unquote difficulty is to keep the awareness on it, because it will naturally drift away. As habitual patterns are developed, you lose the immersion in the awareness, right? So when you drive a car, for example, chances are you don't think about every time you change the gear, every time you press the pedal, because they've been automated. And so somebody who's spent 20 or 30 years believing that they're not good enough, that's where their attention is going to naturally drift to, until the new self-concept becomes dominant. And at that point, whatever is subconsciously normalized is expressed in behavior. And it's really subtle sometimes. It shows up when somebody goes from that, people-pleasing is something I help people with a lot, to knowing that they're enough, right? So having enough self-validation and self-worth. And it'll start showing up in the most simple of ways. They'll just start gently saying no to things that they would have said yes to out of obligation previously. And that's what I'm talking about. It's a subconscious behavioral expression of who they are truly being internally. And for those people who really like the pragmatic way of looking at this, it is the dominant behavioral patterns in the brain that get produced via behavior. And when we understand that the brain is always seeking equilibrium, right? It's basically a prediction machine. So it's looking out into your world and saying, okay, well, what are my predictions regarding this? My work, for example, my boss. And it'll bring up these predictions. And when the prediction is high, for example, it has got a good degree of certainty, we feel peace, right? We feel calm. When there's a high degree of uncertainty, we feel anxiety. Because the brain is like, oh, be on high alert. We don't know what's going to happen. Stay alert, stay aware, stay stressed. Because stress is good if you're in a dangerous situation. But it's not so good when we're trying to go through our day-to-day, every day. And so this is why it's so important to master your mind and master your attention, because otherwise you're living permanently reactive to stimulation. And that's how people end up chronically overstressed, chronically unable to relax, unable to be still, because they're training their attention to be seeking the outside. Because again, it's simply looking for that certainty. And oftentimes they don't have it because they've never learned it. And so they'll look externally for, validation, dopamine, all those things in order to try and get themselves into that state of like being enoughness. But it's never found out there. And if you've ever had this experience, I'm sure you probably have, of either finding yourself scrolling on your phone, which is a very engineered process, or even better, watching somebody else scrolling on their phone and then asking them, hey, what are you looking for? And they're just like, it's almost like they wake up out of a trance and they're just like, whoa, what am I doing? That's happening at all times. And there's like so much danger in that, which we don't have to get into here. But it becomes very dangerous when you're not able to be at peace and actually relax the brain into safety, which is the one thing that it's seeking out there. So we could get into that. That's a whole different topic, but it all falls under this umbrella of self-mastery, as you like to say, which I love because the one and only thing to master is self.
Yep, that's actually why I even created my app. And you touched on all the things like there's even so log your actions. There's a part where doom scrolling is one of the things. And once you create enough, or once you create any negative actions, there's an add-on that is called shadow work, and it shows all of your negative actions. And then you can click on the negative action and say if you want to change it and how you're going to change it. So this will create a pattern over, say, a week, and you can read all those, and you'll see the exact pattern you're going through and how you're going to change it. So for me, there's the defining one for the last week is I'm not scheduling tasks correctly, and the inner guide in there is saying, hey, basically, it's just telling me bluntly, you got to work on scheduling your tasks. Do that today. Like, start that today. Like, you want to do that, but you're not doing it, kind of thing. And it's like, oh, okay. Like, yeah, I'm
But
aware of
again,
it. I know what needs to change, and I will change it as soon as my mind is ready to change it. As soon as I make that decision to change it.
but here's a question to ask yourself on the back of that, if you're open to it. What are you protecting by not scheduling? Is it freedom? Is it
Comfort.
autonomy? Is it something that the brain values? Because it might be a bit controversial, but I don't believe there are any negative behaviors. There are behaviors that don't serve you. There are behaviors that are self-destructive. But to the brain, there's nothing objectively
Okay.
negative or positive.
Yeah,
It's
so
simply how it. I should say it's simply how it's learned to solve a problem. Right? There are people, for example, who feel deep insecurity or they feel deep loneliness, and their brain has found a way through like drugs and alcohol to solve the problem of I feel this way and I need relief from it. Now we would call that a negative behavior or a self-destructive behavior, but the brain is doing the best it can with what it's learned to get to a different state. And so what we find in like addiction recovery is oftentimes when simply people go cold turkey on things without the support in place, is they'll substitute one destructive behavior for another destructive behavior because the behavior itself isn't the thing that actually matters to the brain. It's the outcome, much like in the market. And so what we need to find is a better way to get the same outcome for the brain.
I love that you said all that because it is a true self mastery app. So, what I
Mm.
have in health, right? So, junk food is negative for your health, it's a negative action for your health.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
I have it in emotional well being that for comfort food. So, you can actually add custom actions in each of them. So it's a positive thing in comfort food. So if I wanted ice cream, it'd be negative on the health aspect, but it would be positive on the emotional well-being aspect of it. And that goes through everything. That's why there's
Mm.
custom actions. It's a self-reflection app. It shows you who you see yourself as and based on the actions that you create. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that seems.
that's why I like that you really picked that up right there. And you're like, hey,
Yeah.
I need to correct you with this. And I was like, yeah, okay.
Well, it's never a correction. It's just a different perspective. Because again,
Yeah, exactly.
the beautiful thing is, something can be correct to me and incorrect to you, and we can both be right to ourselves. And so
Yep.
I never make the assumption that I'm correcting anybody. I present a different viewpoint that might allow you to have more agency over your own actions. Because again, just thinking about it from the perspective of, let's say, somebody who believes that, they're no good at anything. They were raised to believe, you're not going to be any good, you're not going to amount to anything. Surprisingly common, unfortunately. When somebody says, hey, you're doing this wrong, they're very likely to accept that as an unmitigated fact. You're wrong. And that would lead them to believe, well, I can't do anything right. And then even if they, and again, this is the thing, right? Even if they have a great business idea, it's filtered through the lens of I can't do anything right. So that's the only thing they are able to produce. And so it's so interesting and, I believe, essential for people to really challenge anything and everything that they believe is correct or incorrect. Because the truth is there's nothing right and nothing wrong. Everything is neutral. And it's the subjective lens of the observer that grants it its subjective morality, because morality is subjective. It's not a universal. So yeah, I always like to tell people, like, hey, there's nothing right and nothing wrong. Everything works to whom it works for. But there are things that you prefer and don't prefer. Like, a lot of people would say that they would prefer to not get blackout drunk in order to get over their emotional feelings of abandonment or whatever it is. There are probably more beneficial ways to deal with that, as opposed to it being a purely positive or negative. Because, there's this, I'm not sure if you've heard of Esther Hicks from the Abraham books or whatever they do, but she said something really, really interesting ones on like anger. And, they were having a conversation, and people were saying, well, anger is a negative emotion. Anger is a terrible emotion. We want to get rid of all of that. And she reframed it and said, well, anger is better than apathy, because it gives you more agency. You're more in control.
Neutrality.
Yeah, and it's basically a scale that they have. And I think if you read Richard Dawkins' books, he talks about the emotional scale as well. But the idea that something is good or bad is only in relation to something else. And so it's very, I find, freeing to understand that there's nothing right or wrong, nothing good nor bad, only your thinking makes it so. And when people really understand that, they can let go of that need of always having to be good or morally perfect, right? Which becomes a very challenging thing to do, especially when you're on the path of self-mastery, which is going to be a journey that really brings you face to face with who you believe you are, what you believe is good and bad. I think it's just really, really interesting to actually have that understanding that life is neutral. It's mechanical.
Yeah.
And in that is the freedom to choose what you believe is good and bad.
Yeah, that's what I call the universal law of balance. It doesn't care about your emotion, it doesn't care about your view, it cares about balance, about equilibrium. And yeah. What is your argument when someone says there is good, there is bad, this is morally good? Like, what is your argument on that? Because
I wouldn't argue. I'd say, well, you're right to you.
Yes.
There's no way I can argue it. I can try and show you how I see things, but unless you're interested in adopting that perspective, which is your choice, then me trying to tell you that you're wrong from your point of view and I'm right from my point of view is completely illogical, right? We're both right from our own point of view. It's like, you've seen that meme where the two guys are pointing at the number on the floor. To one it says 6, to one it says 9. I mean, they're both right.
Yeah.
So yeah, when somebody says there are things that are morally correct, I mean, there are things that I think are good. I like it when people are kind to each other, when people look after each other. Those things are preferred and what I would consider good. Other people would consider them weakness. When you look at because I'm very much into like world building, narration, things like that. There are two great philosophies in world building when it comes to like the strong should take care of the weak, right? To one culture, it's seen as, no, the strong should be the strong and only the stronger should survive so that the society benefits. And then the other is, well, the strong should take care of the weak so that everyone rises together. They're both right from their own perspective. They're just incompatible viewpoints, which is what leads to conflict, which is what leads to drama, which is what leads to engagement. And life is the same way, to someone, just to give you an example, like to somebody, having more money might seem like a really good thing because they were raised to believe that, money is good, money gives you options, money is a very healthy thing to have, it's an expression of your value. And there's another person who believes don't get too much money because people will come and try and take it away from you, and they are fearful of it, right? More money, more responsibility, more money, more problems. The objective fact hasn't changed. It's just an increase in resource. It's an increase in logistics. It's the story that people tell about it that influences their behavior around it. To the person who doesn't believe they're worthy of a lot, if somebody was to give them $1 million or pounds or whatever, they would find a very self-destructive way to get back to where they believe they belong. We see it all the time. You know, there's an old saying that if someone gives you $1 million, best you become a millionaire, because otherwise you'll lose it. And likewise, if somebody's, very comfortable with $1 million worth, and then they lose it, but they never let it change who they believe they are or how they view it, then they'll very quickly get it back. It isn't random that happens so often that, you see all these stories of billionaires who lose everything and then get it right back again. They didn't stop being a billionaire. They let it become their normal. To them, it's a good thing. To them, it's in alignment with who they are. And so their behavior will naturally adjust to create the circumstances through their actions to express that. And it works the other way as well. You take somebody who's programmed to be very anti-rich, a lot of the Generation X had this, eat the rich and all that sort of thing. And even if they would have then come into money, they would find a way to get rid of it because to them it's a moral bad. And they want to be good. And again, this is so endemic in the society that we live in because we're trained from a very early age that rich, bad, poor, good. Right? You look at movies like Titanic. Rich guy's the bad guy. Poor guy's the good guy. It's everywhere. And so you end up with people who are programmed to think poor is good, I want to be good, rich is bad, I don't want to be bad, but I do want to be rich, but I don't want to be bad. And they stay stuck because they're now misaligned internally. And they're frustrated. And they'll often chase the thing, but then spend the thing and lose it so that they get to remain morally where they believe they should be. And it's a circle that people spend years and years and years in, stressing themselves out because they never really feel aligned with their values. And again, the solution is awareness. It takes an hour, 15 minutes to have a conversation where, we tell people, what do you think about money? Money is a tool. Money is neutral. Money is numbers on a screen. Or money is the worst thing in the world. Money is the best thing in the world. Right? We have to bring it, as Carl Jung famously said, and I love this this quote, until you make the subconscious conscious, it'll rule your life and you'll call it fate. So this is why self-mastery or becoming unshakable in the person that you've chosen to be is so vital. And the really brutal truth is, even if you succeed, quote unquote, however you define success, but you don't move into the occupation of the state that is normal to, you'll lose the success in order to get back to where you believe you belong every single time. And we see it time and time and time again. So external success without internal fulfillment leads to external sabotage to get back to fulfillment, whatever that looks like, good or bad.
I wanted to talk about highly controversial things right there, but I don't want to turn this into that kind of thing. Okay, I got your permission. So I just saw a post on X about Elon Musk, where they were talking about his net worth is $1 trillion, right?
Sure.
Why are they I know why they're doing it, but in my mind, I kind of had a little laugh at it because they were talking about how dare he have the audacity, basically, to have $1 trillion net worth while there are people hungry in the world. And in my mind,
sure.
I went straight to, why is that his problem? Why are you putting that on him to solve that? He had a mission and he's gonna fulfill his mission. Why do you want to take that away from his purpose? Because it's your purpose? Your purpose is more important than his purpose? Yeah, that's the thing that just popped in my mind with that.
It's born out of a place of ignorance, and sometimes it's like a lot of people have been trained that it is a moral good to be poor. A lot of people have been trained that like money is evil. And they don't understand is if someone has $1 trillion net worth, they've created at least $1 trillion in value. It's mechanical, right? It's like, what has Elon done for the world? A whole bunch of stuff. Go check out his stuff. He's built cars, he's built rockets, he's built social platforms, whatever. Right? He's created value, and value is rewarded by cash. I like to tell people in business that business equals solving problems in exchange for money. That's all it is. But again, I do know people like this in person who are like, there should not be any billionaires. And I was like, why? If somebody creates $1 billion in value, don't they deserve to get $1 billion in cash? And they can't seem to put that together because to them it's so far removed, and they believe that if they have more, then I'll have less. Well, it's like, well, the answer to that is the person with zero money producing any value? Like to the world, to the market. I'm not talking about intrinsic self-worth because that's a given. But it's like if somebody's making $30,000 a year rather, they're generating $30,000 worth of value or thereabouts for their employer, so they're paid in proportion. And it's a different way of thinking when you get into business, because now it's no longer, well, my time is worth X amount per hour. It's, well, how much value can I create? So when I look at Elon, who's created $1 trillion worth of value, fantastic. And again, he's been on podcasts saying this is just the stock I own in companies. It's not my own personal net worth. But like, the point is the same. Even if he had a trillion in cash, and that had come from legitimate means by providing value, it's neither a moral good nor a moral bad. It just is. And I guarantee you, he's not thinking about the money. He's thinking about the mission, as you said.
Exactly.
And this is one of the.
Brought up to mind. Oh, that just brought up to mind some people back from home. They were always complaining about the situation they're in, and I just straight up said, why don't you go learn a trade? Why don't you go like learn some skills that can make you more money and get you out of that minimum wage job? And then they just blame the government. I'm like, okay, you need to do some inner work, sir.
Well, the thing is, right, it's the same thing I was talking about earlier, right? Their brain will use logic to justify where they are, because it takes much less effort, internal efforts. And again, the brain is an energy preserving machine. It takes less effort to do that than to acquire the skills to change their situation, because that comes with a whole bunch of additional threats, right? And here's the biggest one. I will no longer fit in with the people who I value their approval. And this is what we see. There's an effect called the crab bucket effect, right? Where if a crab tries to get out, the other crabs will pull it back in so that no crab gets out. And it's really interesting. If you put one crab in the bucket, that crab will get out just fine. But if you put multiple crabs in the bucket, they'll pull each other back down. And this is a natural equilibrium that we adopt as humans, because we've evolved to understand that exile means death, because very often it did. If you were exiled from the tribe in previous eras of our existence, you were literally sentenced to death in some cases, because the wilderness would kill you, or the environment would kill you, or you didn't have somebody to watch you while you were sleeping. Dangerous stuff. And our environment has changed tremendously, but our hardware hasn't. So people, and you see this with people who think public speaking is the most dangerous thing they can do, right? I've had people say public speaking terrifies me. I won't do it. And it's very often ranked as one of the highest fears that people have, because it's so dangerous, because they feel that in front of this group of people, if I say something wrong, I will be shunned and exiled, and I will literally die. Like, that's what the mechanics, the machinery that we're working with is thinking. And so that person who's like, well, if I earn twice as much as the people around me, I will now not fit in. And so I will modulate my behavior, right, the external expression, the behavior, to meet who I choose to be within, which is safe and accepted by these people. And it's also the reason why environment and standards are two of the greatest controllers of behavior, rather than individual capacity. Because every individual knows how to do better than they're doing, but they're not doing it for a reason. And very often that is the approval of the people around them.
Yeah, I like to use a pendulum diagram, or example. So you got your pendulum, that's you. And then every time you add someone into your circle, you're going to clash with them at some point in time. And the best way to not clash with them or clash with them the least is to try to work with them. And
Hmm.
then the more people that you add to that pendulum or to your space where you add more pendulums, the more people will clash until you all reach a certain state of understanding and compromise. Com- Communication and compromise how you can are the only way to get a smooth pendulum running community.
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned community because that is, in my experience, a group of people with similar goals all heading in the same direction. Like that is the path of a community. And one of the greatest, and this is something I learned a lot about, one of the greatest things about a community identity or a communal identity is that it comes with built-in standards. And so people will modulate their behavior. It's like, so for example, it's like if somebody's like, oh, I am a member of this organization, and members of that organization all do this one thing, then that person will do that one thing and view it as a moral good. And in identity changing, viewing something as a moral good is one of the fastest ways to change the behavior. And so this is one of the reasons why joining a high leverage or high caliber community is one of the best ways you can change your behavior. And we see this all the time in people who join masterminds. You know, they come in and they might pay like 30 grand to be part of the mastermind. It's not because the information's worth 30 grand. It's because the caliber of person forces them to level up to the level that is socially accepted by the community. And it's really, really interesting. And yet all of this sits underneath the awareness. Because all of this is effectively guardrails and scaffolds to the awareness. You don't need any of this stuff, but it's helpful because it raises the floor or the ceiling of what is considered as normal. And again, that is the one word that I want everyone to take away from this. Normal, whatever is normalized is expressed. And this goes back to what I was saying from James Allen, right? You don't get what you want, you get who you are. Whatever you believe is normal to you, I'm the kind of person that ... That is what over a certain period of time, there'll be fluctuations and divergences, but if you stretch it out over a long enough time, it's one-to-one.
Oh, there's so much things that you say that just like you, Nathaniel Perron, and even Danny Rosenblatt James. Just it makes me want to go off on all these different tangents. And let's see, the one thing that I do want to touch on with that one. What is the one thing? Like my mind gets so scattered. I need to work on that. Like so bad because uh hmm, I'm sorry. I'm really having like this weird brain fart right now. There was something that you had in there, and I will just stop it right here so we can continue the rest of
Sure.
this little show, and let's talk about what you do or why you do it. I think we covered why you do it, so
Yeah,
we can talk about what you do now.
sure. Well, I think they're both intertwined, right? Because what I do is I help people stay stable in the state of the wish fulfilled without permitting any distraction, right? That's basically the one thing that people need. Because in 2026, and I look at this as a future-facing problem, we're no longer capped by information. Like for centuries, we were capped by information. If you wanted to learn something, you'd have to go and apprentice with a master who would parcel out the information. You need to prove that you were ready, and then they would train you, which is ironically a very good way to learn. But now we're not capped by information, and yet we have more problems than ever. So there are more overweight people in the world than ever before, and yet access to nutrition and fitness has never been easier. It's free. There are more resources available on how to succeed in business than ever before, and yet the vast majority of businesses fail. All right? There is so much on how to make a marriage work, a relationship work, more than ever before, and yet most fail. Why? It's because knowing something is not the same as actually living something, right? Knowing what to do and how to do it are not the same as will you do it. So what I do is I help people stay stable in the chosen state. So if somebody says, hey, I want to be a business owner, and then we look at their behavior and they're not doing the business behaviors, it's because internally they have misalignment, right? Subconscious identity friction. So I work as a hypnotherapist and a coach with people to help them get aligned internally so that their chosen identity and their lived behavior are one and the same. And again, it's not about guaranteeing the results, because as we talked about earlier, the results are the outpicturing of the behavior. But if we look at what's in somebody's control, they want an outcome, but they need to have outputs, and those outputs are led by inputs. If we look at their inputs, which are 100% in their control, that becomes the area that we can really focus on changing. And so I would say, in a word, what I do is I subconsciously normalize the desired reality. If somebody wants to be a fitter person, right, we look at the practical stuff, by all means. I'm not a personal trainer, but I will look at the practical stuff and I will line it up. So subconsciously, someone might say, I want to be fitter. And this was me, by the way, it's my personal experience. Somebody might say they want to be fitter, but they have a subconscious identity or belief that big is safe. And I'll just give you this as a very quick example. When I was growing up, I used to play rugby. Right? I live in Wales. Rugby's a big thing here, so it's kind of like American football, but without the armor. So we basically go in there and scrum. And I'm a big guy. I'm 6'2", right? So big, strong, and like big was safe because I wouldn't get injured. Then when I got into corporate and I started doing mortgage advice, and I was sitting down for 10 hours a day, I kept that subconscious belief. And so every time I would try and lose weight, which was now piling up because I wasn't exercising, I would subconsciously sabotage myself because I had a belief that big was safe. And that led me to getting diabetes, essentially. And that was when I had to really get some help on that, because it turns out big was not safe. And so that's what I'm talking about, is we can have the desire for something. We can have all the knowledge. Like I say, I wasn't capped by knowing that less calories going in than coming out was the way to lose weight. I knew that. I could work out my macros. I could work out a plan, but I wasn't actually following it behaviorally because I wasn't being the person to whom it was normal. I had a part of me that wanted something else, which was to keep me big and safe. So I spent most of my 20s and my early 30s vastly overweight. And it wasn't because I didn't know how to do better. So you could say that what I help people do is decide who they want to be, get clarity on it, and then remain loyal or unshakable to that state so that the behavior then compounds long enough to get results. Because again, I don't believe anyone's capped by information anymore. I think it's embodiment. And I help people embody their chosen state.
And I'm recalling one of the tips that you gave before about working out, where you'd go, even if you didn't want to do it, you'd go touch the back of the gym wall.
Yes.
And then...
Because what could I say then? And again, for anyone who's listening and hasn't heard this story before, when I was trying to start losing weight, I did not make my goal go and crush my workout every single time. I just made it go to the gym building and then touch the back wall, and then I can go home. Because the action was so simple that the only reason I wouldn't do it is if I was deliberately choosing to not be that person, right? And so I made it so obvious that the version of me, and I would say like day one, I was 137 kilos, big guy. And again, I'm normally about 195. So I was vastly overweight, about 40% body fat. And I would say to myself, well, day one, I'm an athlete now. The moment, the decision, I'm an athlete now. If you were to look at me from the outside, furthest thing from an athlete, maybe a sumo wrestler, but like, you know what I mean? But like internally, I decided, athlete. What does an athlete do? They eat clean and they train. So what do? I eat clean and I train. What's the simplest version of that I can implement? That the only barrier to doing it is deliberately choosing the opposite. Go to the back wall of the building, touch the back wall, and then you can go home. Because then what can I say? I am the kind of person that goes to the gym every day. And there's proof. Because again, the mind, and this is something that maybe we don't have time to get into, the egoic mind only updates through proof because it only looks out. So in my experience, there's three parts to your experience. There's awareness, which is the true you, and you can place your awareness on anything for as long as you can hold your attention on it. I can place my awareness on being in a fit body right here, right now, and I can make that true to myself in the moment. It's not physically true, but to my experience, it's true until my awareness gets pulled away. Cool. Okay, that's the start. Awareness. I must identify what I want, and I must occupy the state where it's true internally. Seek ye first the kingdom of heaven, right? That's that part. Then you've got your nervous system, which is a fancy way of saying your brain and your body. And that updates through experience, right? And that's lived or imagined. So you can train. This is how the Navy SEALs do it, mental rehearsal. They'll train for combat physically and mentally so that you can rehearse it. And your nervous system doesn't know the difference. But your egoic mind does. So your rational egoic mind, which is the part of you that believes you are a physical human in a physical world, and that's it. It's the part of you that looks at one side of the coin and says, this is the only side of the coin because it's the only one I can see, right? That's the egoic mind. And it exists as what I call your user interface to reality, to make things make sense. I know I am tall because other people are short. That's what it's for, right? It's the relation, it's the separator. And so the egoic mind only updates through proof. So if we know this, the moment I say I am an athlete and I'm 137 kilos, I'm vastly overweight, my egoic mind is going to say, no, you're not, look. And I'm like, cool. Okay, you're looking backwards. You're looking externally and saying that's true. And like in the moment, physically, yes, it's true. But I have chosen to be an athlete. And so in that moment, who I am being has changed. My results haven't changed. But an internal being has changed. And the internal being is the driver of behavior. So what I was able to do was say, okay, let's find a behavior that is simple enough that I can't fail. And let's start to build proof. And now my egoic mind is, yeah, you are the kind of person that goes to the gym every day. And then all of a sudden, it's really easy to keep that going because I've normalized it subconsciously. And thus, I was able to go to the gym every day without resistance. And the cool thing is, you never stop by touching the back wall. I'm already here. I'm already in my kit. I've done the hard part. May as well get a workout in. And so that's how I was able to lose roughly 40 kilos in weight and get to a pretty healthy body by basically changing who I was being. And then the behavior was aligned. So it wasn't a struggle. It wasn't a force. It wasn't a grind against myself. I was no longer fighting myself. It was still effort. It was still showing up and doing the workouts, choosing the clean food over the tasty food, but it was aligned, so it was easy. And this is where I say to people, if you're grinding from misalignment, you will burn out. It's like driving a car in first gear with the brake on. Whereas if you're in fifth gear and the engine is running smoothly, you can put less effort in, but go faster. And that right there is why I do what I do. Because most people are grinding against themselves. They want money, but they hate rich people. They want fitness, but they believe it's hard and they're not worthy of it. So when we're able to align the mind, as my framework is clear goals, aligned mind, and daily execution. And when we have all of those lined up, everything flows. And the results, they seem effortless from the outside, but they seem normal from the inside.
Yeah, your 3 steps right there. So I seen it in your school classroom. There was about 5 steps, correct? In the whole thing?
I have expanded frameworks, yeah, but the basic one I like to say is CADE, which is clear goals, without direction, any path will take you there, right? Aligned mind, this is the hardest part for most people, is to align their mind, and then daily execution. And I view execution more as a diagnostic, because if behavior was all it took to produce results, then anyone who did that behavior would get that result, and that's not what we see. I've trained over 100 salespeople in my career, and I could tell someone, hey, just make 100 cold calls. Same product, same audience, and read this one script, and you should get this, this is what we would say, you should close 4 in 10 or whatever it was. And yet we would see people who bring a completely different self, a completely different operator to the task. There are people who believe that they are an excellent salesperson. There are people who believe that they are an excellent speaker and that they're great at service. And those people would close 6 and 7s, right? And then there are other people who have a very low perception of themselves. Again, nothing physically is changing. Same script, same audience, same target market, same everything, different result. And it's those thousands of micro subconscious decisions, right? Like their tonality, their pacing, those little things that are subconscious. Those are the things that influence the decision. And when you have a clear goal and an aligned mind, the daily execution, the being that person, doing the things that person would do, becomes a diagnostic. If I'm not doing the daily execution, then I go upstream back to, well, am I clear on what I want? And am I being the person who already has it? Because if I am, the daily execution should flow. So this is where I think I'm divergent from a lot of people who believe that if you just hustle and grind the behavior enough, you'll get the result. And don't get me wrong, exposure to doing the behavior normalizes it because it reduces the prediction error, right? So if I call 100 people, I'm less scared at the end of it of calling people because I've done it 100 times and, oh, I'm still here, you know? But again, it doesn't change the fact that if success is not normal for me, then I'm not going to be successful no matter how much I try. Success, however you define it, must be normal because whatever is normalized is expressed.
Yeah, I'm gonna start expressing that as my new normal. No, but
Yeah,
what you reminded me of there was like, so one of the things that my mind got scattered on, because that's how my mind works, was Matthew McConaughey and one of his speeches. He was talking about his hero. His hero is him, 10 years in the future. And every 10 years, it's still his hero. How is he
Mhm.
going to get there? He's never going to reach that, but he's going to keep fighting to get there. And then he's just going to keep repeating that process and really embed that into his expression. So that's how he became who he was.
Yeah.
There was 3 times that I wanted to bring that up, but we keep talking hearing everything else just like scatters my brain.
No, it's good. And I mean, I'm glad you brought that up. The only thing I would challenge is fighting to get there.
Oh, going in alignment, the smooth road
Yeah.
of who you are.
And it's actually really interesting when we have this language come up, right? Because the brain and humans in general, we love a struggle. Like we love the underdog, the person who goes through the trials and tribulations and comes out the other side. It's like we started this podcast and I talked about the dark night of the soul, right? In the hero's journey, which is steady state world, call to adventure, going through the road of trials, dark night of the soul, belly of the whale, that kind of thing. And then you come back changed. And we love that idea of struggle. The hero's journey is central to the human mythology because it's universally something we can all apply to, right? We go through a struggle, we do something that's outside of the normal, and then we come back changed. We come back with our normal adjusted. And the thing that people seem to have picked up is that it has to be a fight. And now it's uncomfortable, but that's very different to a struggle, right? So the reason I say that is comfort keeps you where you are. So the comfortable world is the steady state world. If I don't step outside of my comfort zone, I don't change who I am. However, it doesn't necessarily mean a fight because what are you fighting against? You're fighting against your programming. And when you are aware, you can simply neutralize that by understanding this is simply a pre-programmed response based on what my body and brain have decided is the most efficient way to solve this particular problem. I now choose a different way of solving it because I want the result that comes with this new way. Boom. 10 seconds. And you can completely neutralize that script internally. So, though it is uncomfortable to change, it is not a fight always. Right? I think it's really important to make that distinction. And this is actually a good thing. You can learn to treat discomfort as progress, right? And this is a great reframe for anyone who wants to do something that's outside of what you want to do, right? Lose weight, make more money, whatever it is. Anything that's going to require you to get uncomfortable. Because most people treat discomfort as a bad thing. Like most people today treat discomfort as trauma. Oh my gosh, discomfort. Can't have that. Whereas it's actually proof that you are moving outside of your programmed, conditioned, patterned self, your comfort zone, or your, as I prefer to call it, your zone of familiarity, because it's not always comfortable, right? But the goal is to look at discomfort as proof that you are changing. And now we can reframe it into a positive. Yeah. And so it no longer becomes a fight to change. The only quote unquote challenge is, can I hold my attention on the new version that I want to become and remain loyal to it with my behavior? If I have the strength of will to do that, and not force, by the way, the strength of will, the power to do that, then the expression of that, the behavior, will be the natural consequence, because whatever is normalized is expressed. And so now it's become normal for me to go to the gym, as an example. Didn't have to fight myself to do that, didn't have to beat myself up to do that. I just had to get away from the comfort of not doing that, because that was what was normal to me. And now I was able to get to the point where not going to the gym is uncomfortable. If I take more than a couple of days off, I'm like, oh, I'm itchy. What do? I go to the gym, I feel great. So you can transpose that success into any other area of life. You can teach people to get really used to rejection, another thing that people fear. You can teach people to get really used to doing extreme sports, for example. It's all about what is normalized.
Yep. I like what you were saying. I like what you said about fight, and it really made me realize that uh, how language works. Because
Mm-hmm.
I don't, I don't see fight as a negative aspect, but in the same token, when uh, when I'm talking about inner work and how to accept yourself, you don't fight your inner demon. You don't fight the person inside of you.
No.
You embrace them. You hug them. You shake their hand and you absorb their power because they
Mm-hmm.
are you. You unlock the you that you didn't know was sleeping by
Yeah.
accepting you.
Are you familiar with the story of Hercules or Heracles?
I am. I am.
Okay. So for anyone who's not, there's a Greek story about Heracles, right, son of Zeus. And the story goes that he would fight the Hydra, the many-headed beast. And the more you fight it, the stronger it gets. And this is a representation of, quote unquote, internal struggle, whatever it is, whatever you want to apply this to. Let's say it's an intrusive thought or a negative thought or a negative trait of self. You can't fight against it, because the more you place awareness and attention on it, the more it grows. So how did Heracles beat the Hydra? He set it on fire. And fire represents starving of oxygen, right? Withdrawal of attention. And so the only way to beat, quote unquote, a negative trait, and again, negative being subjective, is to withdraw your attention from it and focus the attention on the thing that you want, right? The occupancy of the state of the wish fulfilled, we'll say. And it's a really interesting story, because so many of the Greek mythologies overlap with the modern interpretations that we have, or the biblical interpretations that we have, and very few people actually notice it. It's like the story of Odysseus. Not what it was Odysseus, it was Eurydice, rather, I think it was. Goes into hell, goes into Hades, wants to get Eurydice back. And the devil says, or Hades says, yes, she's yours, but if you look back, you'll never see her again. And as he was walking out of hell, the demons, quote unquote, the emotions, right? Because demons equate to emotions in biblical scripture and in Greek mythology, were effectively toying with him. And he would hear sounds from behind, and eventually he gave in and he looked back and he lost forever. Because again, it's about that internal awareness, that ability to shut out the perceptions, right, and to remain focused on the chosen state that then produces the effect of that state through behavior. So yeah, I always like to think of that story of Hercules. You don't, and like it was said in one of the Marvel movies, like we don't defeat our demons, we learn to live above them. We don't defeat our emotions, because our emotions are helpful. We learn to live above them. We learn to be meta to them. So it's really, I always find it really interesting when you look back at all of these different cultures separated by generations and land masses and oceans, and they all say the same thing, because they all understood this.
Yeah, that's how I see every holy book that I've ever even heard of. They all have the same core meanings. You got the like the angels, the demigods, the demi-humans, and uh, the all-encompassing being. So that's what I sort of seen through meditation on how they all connected. And that's why I advocate for inner work, for meditation, because it helps you recognize the patterns of the universe, the patterns of the world, in a way that you haven't seen with the way that we're taught growing up, unless you're in one of those kinds of communities that teach that.
Yeah, I think it's all perception.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
the great thing about a human is you can take a human, and the Spartans would say this: "Give me the boy until he's 7, and I'll show you the man." You can take a human and you can mold them to be anything. You can mold them to be terrible or angelic, and it's all perception. Based on it's all based on what they believe to be true, right? And this is why I think it's so valuable to be taught this stuff at a very young age, as you know, few of us are. But for those that can be, they get to live a much more aligned life, and oftentimes go on to produce amazing things. But anybody can change at any time. This is the beauty of the system: is you're never locked into a particular way of being. If you are older, like if you are in 30s or 40s, you will have existing preconceived patterns, existing preconceived belief structures, and existing preconceived associations with things, right? And it might take quote unquote work, which is really just focused awareness, to deliberately choose again until the new choices are the new automatic default response. But it can be done. So nobody is trapped in their old way of being, save for the lack of attention and awareness, disciplined mental effort to remain in the new state. And that's the beautiful thing about this, because before 1900, people believed that once you were, a certain age, that's just the way you were. You couldn't change. And we know now that's different, right? We now know you can change at any age. It does get slower as you get older, which is why children from 0 to 7 are in a effectively an alpha brainwave state at all times, theta to alpha. So they are effectively pre-critical factor. They don't have an ability to reject information at all. Everything goes in. And as people get older, their critical factor becomes more well developed. Their egoic story becomes more well developed, and they view life through the lens of that, so they never really change it. But it can be changed. And that's the beauty of what I do, and what I want to help people with is like, you can get a different result by being a different version of you to whom that result is normal. And the
All you have to
more
do
that
is
you,
make that choice.
it's a decision, and then it's a discipline to remain loyal to that version of you. And it can be challenging, right? As you said earlier, because the world is the world. It will present counter evidence. Going back to my weight loss story, I said I was an athlete. I said I train and I go to the gym every day. The scale showed me, 135 kilos, 40% body fat. The evidence of my senses was counter to who I knew I was. And if I was undisciplined in my thinking, I would have said, well, this isn't working. But, as is so often the case, there is a lag measure in the result. So the ability to remain in the chosen state regardless of seeing evidence change is kind of like, it's like what all the great business people say. It's like all of a sudden it happens after years of nothing, right? But it's the accumulation, it's the compound effect of the occupation of that identity and the actions that are taken from that identity that then lead to an asymmetric payoff down the road, right? It's like going to the gym. Nothing happens after a day, a week, 2 weeks. But after a month, 2 months, 3 months, it starts to become obvious. And again, it wasn't any one day that did that. It was the accumulation of being in that state with discipline that did that.
Yeah, that is a very nice masterclass that you just did on self mastery. So I do appreciate your time, and time is precious. We did go over 30 minutes, and I appreciate you staying with us for that extra 30 minutes. Um, but let's close it out with, where can people find you?
So if you want to learn more about what I do, you can check me out I'm on Twitter or X at the Will Carter, on YouTube at the Will Carter, and I run a Skool community called Unshakeable Entrepreneurs for those who are in business. And the goal is to practice this embodiment. I don't have a lot of theory, and I don't have a lot of theoreticals. I have a lot of practicals. So if you are interested in living what you have learned, then you can apply to join Unshakeable. And if you are an entrepreneur, if you are a business owner, if you are somebody who knows that there is another level of success, but it is not aligned yet with who you believe you are, you can apply to work with me directly. And the links are all in my bio, on my Stan store, and in my X profile.
And they will be down in the description once this goes and gets uploaded. So thank you again, Mr. Will Carter, and hopefully we'll have you on the show here again soon. In the next
My pleasure.
few
Thank you for
months.
having me. Fantastic. Thank you, Stephen.
Yes, sir. Thank you.